All right, Rain, are you ready to go through time travel and understand it?
Yes.
That does not sound very confident.
I'm just worried how much it's going to make my brain melt.
Well, I need you to get in your most focused brain state. Do you understand anything, first off, before we go into about the time travel in this game? Like any of the rules?
Yes, you can only travel back in time if you were there before.
Okay.
I know that much.
That's it?
Which is why Xehanort's thing is so confusing, but basically that's it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this will be very enlightening for you then, because I have, in terms of the rules, I have like roughly 8 bullet points for the rules. So,
okay.
Let's just dive into this. All right. So rule number 1, Rain, you must leave your body behind and become just a heart. Okay. So you have some examples of this would be removing your heart via a keyblade and thus becoming a heartless, or if you become a heartless is essentially only a heart, right? It's like the darkness of a heart that overwhelms it. So Sora removing his heart in Kingdom Hearts 1, for example, would be a situation that enabled him to time travel, essentially. We'll get into that.
He can time travel because that happened.
Exactly. We'll get into more of that, though.
Okay.
But rule number 2, you're only able to travel through time if there's a version of yourself present at the time you want to travel to, which is something you said to me at the beginning here. Yeah. So it seems like you grasp that. You got to be there. Sora can't just yeet himself 500 years in the past before he was even born. He wasn't there. He can't do that. Then we have destiny is set and cannot be changed. What has and will happen is set in stone. You cannot change the past or future. I think this makes sense because then otherwise you could literally change the plot of Kingdom Hearts and just be like, oh, let's go back to, when Princess Xehanort made Emblem heartless, and let's freaking just make him not do that or something. It's like, well, all the enemies are now gone, or most of them. Pure blood heartless are still all out there, but like you could just change so much, and it's like, oh my god. So to keep continuity of everything that's happened and make it all canon and everything, they're like, yeah, you can't change anything.
Okay.
Now, when you travel back in time, you will forget, like back to your time. So, if, what do you call it? Young Xehanort travels in time. He goes back to his time. He doesn't have any memory of what he experienced in his time in the future. So he's not like, ooh, now I know what's going to happen. Ooh, I'm Master Xehanort. I'm going to be a baddie. It's like he doesn't know all that. He forgets all of that. However, his experience in that time period leaves tracks on his heart, leaves like an etching on his heart that will basically lead him without him knowing, kind of subconsciously, I would say, leading him towards his destiny, if you want to call it that, of what will happen in the future. And so that's why young Xehanort kind of says, I must go back to my time, and, I will want to leave the island to seek out more. Like that's kind of his reason. That's what drove him to seek out more, is this etching that's on his heart. Does he know there's more, this destiny? Does that make sense?
Okay, so when you return to the time you came from, you forget everything, but it stays as like a print on the heart.
Yeah, yep. So it's like it's still etched into your heart a little bit, but you don't remember it. However, it seems like Sora and Riku, I think it's maybe because, Xehanort's a weird thing where it was like he went to the future and then back to the past. I think he was young Xehanort, which we'll get to that in a minute. And I want to make this very apparent. When I'm talking about this time travel, there are multiple types of time travel in this. We're going to be talking about this one type, arguably 2 types, depending how you look at this. There is another thing. Some of you guys are going to be like, there's this other requirement. You guys are thinking of a different type of time travel. No, we are not getting into that. Another day, not today. We'll talk about that. So you guys who are just like, well, there was this requirement. Nope. Just hear me out, all right? I want you to hear me out through this whole time travel thing. We'll get there. We'll get there, everybody, all right? Oh, I guess with like the Sora and Riku thing, because they keep their memories of the dream stuff when they go to the future. So they go back to their time. So I think it's like a retroactively acting thing.
Yeah.
I would say. All right, so next rule is if at any point in your existence, past or future, you have your heart removed from your body, you unlock the ability, keyword on ability, to time travel for all selves, past and future. So essentially, if you remove your heart, like let's say how Sora removed his heart in KH1, he removes his heart there. Every single version of himself across the timeline, if you think of his timeline as a little loop of life and death kind of coming together at one end, everything in that loop gains the ability to time travel. Okay. So Sora at the beginning of KH1 unlocks the ability to time travel because Sora at the end of KH1 removed his heart. And then also that, which I think makes more sense, his future self, so KH2 Sora, is also able to time travel because KH1 Sora removed his heart.
Yes. Okay.
So that's kind of, I think that's specifically, this rule is really about Xehanort. That's where this rule is really applicable most to. But I think it's important to just know as a concept that it would work for any character. Having the ability to time travel doesn't mean you have the power to time travel. If you have the ability to time travel, you still need assistance to do so. So that's why I said keyword on the last one is ability. You gain the ability to time travel. You don't have the power to time travel. So just to kind of illustrate this in the best way possible, because I think it's a little bit like mind-boggling. Think of time travel as a battery that you're trying to use to power a remote control, we'll say, just for like a TV or something. Okay. So the ability to time travel is the battery, and we'll call it a rechargeable battery, just for ease of understanding. It's just the battery that's dead. It's a dead battery is essentially the ability to time travel. Now, the power to time travel is the electricity you put into the battery. So and if you only have the case and you put it in a remote control, it's not going to do anything. It's a dead battery. Nothing's going to happen. If you just shoot the remote with electricity, it's going to like short circuit and just freaking break the thing. It's like just not going to work. But if you have both, if you have the conductor of the battery and then you have the electricity then that goes into the battery, the time travel power, then it works and you can do it. I think that's the easiest way to explain it in terms of ability versus power, because they're separate things. Does that make sense?
I understood it before you did the battery thing, and now I'm just confused.
You're confused by that?
The battery thing confused me, yeah, but I understand that just because you can time travel doesn't mean you have the power necessary to time travel.
Yeah, I mean, that's another way to say it, but I like my illustration. It makes sense to me, and maybe it helps somebody else understand it who wasn't able to understand it. So if you guys like that, then there you go. Otherwise, there's that. The ability versus power. However you guys need to see it to make sense, both are equally the same. They mean the same thing. Just go with it. All right, so next thing. You can only time travel if you are just a heart, or if you have the time travel ability plus the power/assistance. So what I mean by if you're just a heart is that this is how Ansem Seeker of Darkness time travels Roe figure to go back to young Xehanort. He was just a heart and he time traveled there. Then obviously if you have the ability plus the power/assistance, then you can also time travel as well. So this time travel that I've kind of explained is how you use time travel to go back in time. You can only go back in time. Young Xehanort is just the exception. He's a weird one, and just to kind of explain this, I'll get into explaining young Xehanort's thing because he's traveling to the future essentially, and then he's also kind of bringing his other selves to the future as well, because like for example Xemnas, we defeated him, he's dead, so he's coming to the future as well. We'll get into that as I get into the timeline of the time travel in this game. So that's it for the rules. We got the rules down, Rain?
Yes.
You think so?
I did write some of them down on the back of my piece of paper.
All right.
Then I stopped because I was like, "There's too much to write down." The only thing I'm confused at is how did Sora and Riku remember if Xehanort doesn't? Like what? I'm confused why the memory thing doesn't apply to them.
It's confusing. Good job, you figured it out.
Is it because they're going in the past and he's going to the future?
Yes, I think that's exactly why. So I think it's because they kind of went backwards and then came back to the future. Like, for example, their past selves that they end up, which I suppose this is a thing I should address as a rule as well, that I didn't actually have on this list, is that they possess their old bodies, is what happens.
Right.
Because you remove your heart, you travel as just the heart. So then if you get to the time, what are you embodying? Like, you don't have a body there. So you basically possess your old body, and that's what you use to do this little time travel thing. And so, like, his Kingdom Hearts 1 version of himself, like, wouldn't remember it, for example, and we don't see that in the games, which is basically a nice way to be able to do that without, like, making retcons for it, essentially. But then his half that goes to the future again remembers it. Think of it like if you have to go back in time, you're resetting your memory. If you're going forward in time, you keep your memory, I guess. Does that make sense?
Mostly.
I think the only one you have to worry about is young Xehanort, because he's the only one who's weird.
He's the only weird one. Okay.
Well, I guess him and all the other people he brings to the future, Xemnas and all that.
Xehanorts, then.
Xehanorts. Yeah. And some others, but we'll get to that.
Also, by the way, doesn't Organization 13 technically have one member because they are just all Xehanort?
In some ways, I would say they're half Xehanort, like Xigbar. He's still Xigbar, but he's part Xehanort. So he's Xehanort, but he's also not Xehanort. So yes and no.
He's Xigbar.
his Xighanort.
He's Xighanort. Yeah.
Okay, but let's get into the timeline now. So how did this all happen? How did young Xehanort get to do all this? What's happening? All right, let me just paint the picture for you if you can't figure it out with the rules that were given to you. When I don't blame you if you can't.
Okay.
So let's start back in Birth by Sleep. Birth by Sleep, Rain. What did Xehanort do to take control of Terra?
He unlocked his heart and put it in Terra.
He removed his heart and put that into that poor boy Terra. At that very moment is the moment he gained the ability to time travel. There's a lot of people who are just like, oh, when Apprentice Xehanort removed his heart and became Ansem. He actually unlocked the ability when it was Master Xehanort, and that's actually in a Nomura interview where he references Master Xehanort doing this. But we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Now, Apprentice Xehanort becomes, well, I guess Master Xehanort possesses Terra, becomes Apprentice Xehanort. Then Apprentice Xehanort later on removes his heart and becomes Ansem Seeker of Darkness, and then Xemnas, right? His nobody.
Yeah.
When he does this, Ansem Seeker of Darkness travels back in time as he's just a heart. So he's able to do that. He's just a heart, and he travels back in time to young Xehanort. And since he travels back in time, and you just kind of gotta accept that since he's just a heart, he kind of, and he's a scientific researcher. He did research on the heart and all this. So somewhere in that, he kind of developed the power scientifically to time travel. And so he had his little power to time travel through that. Travel back in time to young Xehanort. And since he did this so scientifically, he didn't possess his old body. He was there as his own figure, which we see the brown robe figure, and he's kind of formless, right? Because he's just a heart, he's just kind of a robe. And so that's what he is there, and Xehanort's still there. They're not possessing one another. They're both there in tandem, and Ansem Seeker Darkness is essentially explaining all this fun jazz to young Xehanort there. And he essentially gives young Xehanort the power to time travel in this instance. Young Xehanort unlocked the ability to time travel back in Birth by Sleep when Master Xehanort did it. It retroactively affected young Xehanort. So that's when he had the ability, and then Ansem Seeker Darkness gave him the power to, by being there present with himself, and like he passed it on to him essentially. Okay. And this is a young Xehanort specific thing. It isn't like every version of himself now has the power. It's Ansem Seeker Darkness has the power, and he gave it to young Xehanort, who then uses this power to then basically essentially make himself a portal to go to these other times in the future. So he's a portal now. This is like a weird, this is why young Xehanort plays with stuff that's like not used by the other time traveling stuff in this game. He's like really special. He's essentially acts as a portal to go to these future selves of him that is still past selves for Dream Drop Distance time, but his future, it's weird. So he does that, and he basically grabs them, pulls them through the portal, which is why we see them also in Dream Drop Distance, not possessing, young Xehanort or Ansem Secret Dark or a version of Xehanort there, and they're all separate beings. It's because he's pulling them through this like time portal that he's become and created for himself.
Yeah, I'm just imagining him like just this hand appearing out of the midair and grabbing them and pulling them through. And they're like, what are you doing?
I would imagine he's explaining something for him, like he's like, his head goes out with his arm, hey, I'm you from the past, or I'm some version of you, or when he technically yoinks Xigbar out of there too, because we see him fade at the end of Dream Drop Distance. They're kind of phasing out of existence with all the other Xehanorts at the end of the game there. And so they're all going their respective times, which means they were all brought from the future, even though they aren't Xehanort. Essentially, you just got to accept that since Xehanort was alive at that time and present, in the situation of Xigbar and Sayax, who are the characters I'm referring to, at the end of the game, those aren't Xehanort. They're working with Xemnas, so they were around Xemnas, so therefore young Xehanort could go to that time and yoink them with Xemnas, essentially.
Okay.
You following somewhat, or at least so far?
Mostly. I think I'm getting it. Yes. Surprisingly.
Okay. And then we have, Ansem Seeker of Darkness then, who went to young Xehanort, returns back to his time. So he returns back to the future, Destiny Island, Sora, Riku, shenanigans, yada, yada, yada. And since he's there at that time, we remember that is when Sora and Riku then go back to as well, which we'll get to that shortly, but just know that this is the moment that Ansem Seeker of Darkness, the robed figure, marks Sora with the sigil that we see in Dream Drop. Because we see as Sora's going into the realm of sleep, we see a brief image of the robed figure, and at that moment, the robed figure then marks Sora with the sigil so they can track him through the dreams.
Right. I don't remember the robed guy. But...
It was very brief, which I don't blame you. I think they intentionally did that so it's not like super noticeable, and then you're like, wait, what? But then it's there so you can think back to it later and be like, I guess that was a thing. But anyways, then young Xehanort returns to Destiny Islands before it fell to darkness, so he's jumping into the future again with all his other selves in Xigbar and Sayax to then join Sora and Riku and follow them into the realm of sleep with them.
Okay. He just rocked up with a gang of Xehanorts.
Pretty much, they walked up like a thug group in their uniform, black robed figures, black robed cloaks and everything that they all wear, looking like a true gang, and waltzed into that dream like a bunch of badasses.
Oh, I need an image of them all just like slow motion walking like a gang of guys.
and you have the world of Destiny Islands kind of falling into darkness behind them, so it's kind of like, an explosion behind them as they're walking slow motion. They don't look at the Destiny Islands falling behind them. They make sure they just keep looking forward and walk through that keyhole that they open. But yeah, so that's what basically happens there. Now, to get to the little bit of Sora and Riku side of things, we have Yen Sid sends Sora and Riku to Destiny Islands before it falls to darkness. So how does this work? We know that Sora and Riku have the ability. Well, actually, we don't know that Riku. I guess I didn't explain that yet. Riku has the ability to time travel because Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, possessed his heart. So he possessed his heart, and if we remember at the end of KH1, Riku we end up seeing in the realm of darkness, essentially because Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, took over his body and kind of cast his heart out, essentially, and yeeted him down to the realm of darkness, which is why we see him on the other side of the door with Mickey at the end of KH1. So that's kind of why Riku's able to. Obviously, we know Sora removed his own heart, so that's pretty apparent and clear. But anyways, so Sora and Riku have the ability from KH1, and Yen Sid is the power. Essentially, he's magical beings, example, Merlin, Yen Sid, maybe the fairy godmother from like Cinderella, would have like some extra magically abilities that kind of allow them to be this power, and it's kind of like Xehanort did scientifically. They're just doing it magically. It's like there's science version and there's magic version. Xehanort's science, Yensid and stuff is magic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's Disney magic. We love Disney magic. So I wanna bring up this Nomura thing, which perhaps maybe I should have brought up earlier, but this was a Nomura interview. Basically, Nomura is going through the circumstances with young Xehanort, kind of ignoring some of the time travel stuff. So that's as a reminder for you, right? This is the main game developer. It's kind of like the director of it. So this is from him. So first off, when young Xehanort made contact with the Ro figure, the Xehanort called himself Ansem, and his abilities were transferred to young Xehanort as a result of Master Xehanort discarding his physical body. Which keyword there's Master Xehanort, which means it's the birth by sleep one. He was able to surpass time, and this power was carried into the Ro figure. Thus, when young Xehanort made contact with him, he gained this power. Possessing this power, young Xehanort functioned as a portal, summoning Xemnas and Ansem each time they appeared. That's why young Xehanort was there whenever they appeared. So I guess he was like portaling with them. He opened this portal and they yoinked out of it. I think we saw the portal actually, now that I think about it. We saw this portal and he like yoinked them out with him and we saw them. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Fun times. Fun times.
Wasn't it on top of the Notchdam with whatever that world's called that he pulled out? Like,
the City of Bells.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. That was one. He also, then in Sora's Xemnas came out in Tron. If you remember that. He showed up there.
Yes. Yes, I remember that.
But yeah, so that's kind of for those of you just like, that portal seems like a stretch. I mean, he said it, so I would have never came to that conclusion myself. So yeah, that's the thing. So young Xehanort essentially is then following him through the realms of sleep with his other selves, as we see through the games, and as is apparent by Xemnas and Ansem Secret Dark just showing up through there. He's doing that with his past selves. Make sense?
Yes.